All right, I think it is getting there. I think we are live. Hello, everybody. Hello, Arty Peoples, and welcome to another episode of Jerry's Live. My name is Emmy Klein, and I'm your host today. And as you guys can see, we have Kevin back on the show. Kevin Greeland, the Education Program Manager for Golden Artist Colors. So thank you for joining us again, and welcome to the show, Kevin.
Hi, Emmy. How are you?
I'm great. I'm glad to have you here. So Kevin has an amazing show for us, guys, and I hope you're excited because it's on something that I always have a million questions on, mediums. So I am so excited to get all your information. But if you are interested in anything Kevin shows us today, make sure you go to the website, JerrysArtarama.com, and type in today's class code, which is JL252. So if you type that into the search bar, it should bring up a teacher's cart, which will have all of the items that Kevin's going to be going over for us. So if you do have any questions, though, make sure to put them in the chats, and I will be asking them for you guys. So without further ado, Kevin, please.
Thank you, Emmy. And additionally, if you have questions, we have a person in the chat as well. We call them material application specialists. And you can also email us at help@goldenpaints.com, or you can always give us a call. We have a lot of products to go over today, and we kind of divided them into three groups. We're going to review gels, and then we're going to look at gels with something in, which we like to call gels with aggregates. And then we're going to look at paste. So if we can switch the overhead camera, I'm going to kind of go through these particular four. So the first product that we're talking about is soft gel gloss, and that is right here. And then the next product we're going to talk about is the regular gel gloss, and that's this one. And then we're going to take a look at heavy gel matte, and that is the third one. And then we're going to look at the high solid. So the one thing I want to tell you about the gels is the gels come in gloss and semi-gloss and matte, with the exception of the high solid. The high solid is only available in a matte and gloss. And of course, these are all dry. I put these out about a week ago. So we're going to go ahead and scoop some out, and we'll demo those wet, and then we'll take a look and compare them to the dry. So let me go ahead and start with our soft gel gloss. This one's a little softer than our heavy body. It's kind of maybe the consistency of yogurt. The one thing you can see with the gels is they are kind of milky white when they're wet, and then as they dry, they clarify. The gloss, of course, is going to be shiny and give you that sheen. So if I look at this one right here, you can kind of see the sheen of the gloss there. I'm going to do the next one, which is our regular gel gloss. And this one is the one that's closest to consistency to our heavy body.
Now,
we'll scoop some of that one out.
I know someone's going to ask me, so before they do, how long does it take for that you just laid out to dry and be like, say it's paintable or dry enough to where you're not going to dent it or whatever it may be?
Right. So the gels, as they dry, they'll go to a clarifying view. So you'll be able to judge it that way. Generally speaking, relative humidity and everything in the room, these I put out, and they took about 2 days to clarify to this stage. You can see that this one still has a little moisture right in there. And this is now a full week. So it depends on, relative humidity in your studio environment. It depends how thick you're applying it or how thinly, because you can see up here on this one, very thin, that dried right away. Also what you're painting on. So if you're painting on canvas or you're painting on a wood substrate, they're going to take, different times to dry. All right, the next one up will be our heavy gel matte. And this one's going to be a lot thicker. You can see it's kind of like the consistency of peanut butter. It's very stiff. Again, same milky white nature when wet. And then the last one we're going to spread out will be our high solid gel. And this one is a little creamier than the heavy gel, but about the same consistency, kind of like on the peanut butter side. So going down the line with our soft gel, this is going to be the softest one. It will still hold some brush strokes. So if I go in here with a brush, you can kind of see I can create texture with that. It is going to round off a little bit and be a little smoother as it dries compared to the regular gel. This is the one that's closest to our heavy body paint. So this one's going to kind of behave just like heavy body paint and hold that texture. You can see the brush marks in there. The same if I use a palette knife, whatever marks I put in there, it's going to retain all of that. And you can kind of see that in the dry one as well. I just used the palette knife to spread that down so you can see the mark of the palette knife. And then taking a look at the heavy gel matte. So these two are gloss. That's those two right there. And then these two are matte. So this is the heavy gel matte, the one that's kind of closest to consistency of like something thick like peanut butter. Again, if whatever I do with my brush, it's going to hold those marks and those peaks. And then I'll move over and do the same thing to the high solid. You can see whatever I'm doing with the brush, it's going to hold those peaks. If I make tool marks with my palette knife, it's going to retain those marks. If I go back over and just quickly show you on the all the way to the right there, yeah, show you the soft gel gloss. What I do with the palette knife, I don't know if you can see that real close up. We'll get the kind of the side camera on that. You can see that it holds the mark of the palette knife just a little bit softer compared to the regular gel, and then the heavy gel, and then the high solid. Again, this is the wet state, a little milky white, and then as they dry, coming back, you can see here they clarify, the thinner, the more nice and smooth up here, and then the heavy texture down here with the palette knife. So that's wet to dry. Which one you would choose kind of depends on what you want to do and how much texture you want to retain.
Now, I do have a question for you because I've had in the past, I've applied a medium and put some texture into it. And as it dried, it almost contracted a bit, you know, like it held the texture, but it's still kind of contracted quite a bit. Are these any ones that will do that as well? Or do they still, when they dry, they still retain exactly what you've put in?
No, these will dry. If you look at the dry version here, these dried pretty much exactly how there is shrinking occurring. The gels will shrink a little because we're talking about evaporation of moisture there. But you can see if I'll move this wet one out of the way, but you can really see right where I just put that palette knife, it's retained all of those shapes.
Yeah.
So yeah, there'll be a little shrinking on the surface as the evaporation occurs, but whatever mark you put in with your brush or your palette knife or whatever tool you're using, it will pretty much retain those marks. Okay, does that answer your question?
It does. It does.
All right.
I was saying it's really nice to see that palette that you like, the palette knife that you used, and see in comparison, like it's not that different. That's great.
You can tell exactly how I applied it. I just spread it on here and then I went blump, blump with the palette knife, and that shape really is how I left it and how it's drying. And so again, on this one, I'll hold this up just a little bit on the angle so we can look across and see the gloss versus the matte. The other thing, just if you look, when I say it's a little softer and a little rounder, if you just look at those ridges, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Perhaps if I hold it this way looking down, you can kind of see how this is a little more pointy on these because they're a little stiffer, where with the soft gel gloss, it's just a little softer and a little more round. So all of these gels you can use to control the viscosity and sheen of your paint. So I'm going to take those and just do them again in the same order. We have our soft gel gloss, our regular gel, and then we have the heavy gel and the high solid. And on these, I simply applied paint on the top. So I just took a brush and I just brushed our fluid Quin Magenta on there. So I use this fluid Quin Magenta. And I just brushed that on the surface on top. So you don't have any problems with adhesion. Any color can be used on top of the gels. You can use our fluid, our high flow. So it's really up to you. Then on the bottom, I've gone ahead and mixed in the paint color with the gel. And again, just, going back to that sheen, these two are the gloss. So of course they're going to be shiny. These two are the matte, and they're going to be a little more on the matte side. And again, if we kind of just have the light rake over that surface a little bit, you can see the gloss versus the matte.
It's really cool to
What's helping
see.
to create that matte is those the solids that we use in there, the matting
Yeah, I
agent.
was going to say, it's really wonderful to see like the very top where you brush the paint on top of it. The sheen is pretty similar, but then the bottom is where you can really see how it adjusts it quite a bit. Now, I did have a question. The ones on the top where you said you put that paint on top of it,
Yes.
is that just one application or is that multiple layers?
No, this is one application of our Quin Magenta. And so what you'll find is, number one, in the case of our fluids and all of our pigments, we don't really add anything to them. So some sets of colors are a little more transparent or a little more shiny, and some are matte. If we kind of look at the ultramarine blue, you can see that's a little more matte compared to the Quin Magenta, which is a little shinier. So because this is a little transparent, if I wanted to maybe disguise the gel underneath there, I'd have to probably put a second coat on, but this is just one brush application on there and allowing that to dry to show that you can build up the texture with the gel and then put your paint on top and maybe save a little bit of paint by building up your texture with the gel versus mixing them in. As I said, this one is a little on the glossy side, the Quin Magenta, and it's also a little on the transparent side. But I can change that gloss by using my gel and mixing them in with a matte gel. The interesting thing is the high solid matte is still a little glossier compared to the heavy gel matte. The heavy gel matte is a little, out of all of them, is a little more matte than the high solid. So you just kind of have to find out which is, your personal preference in terms of sheen or matteness.
Now, I did have one question pop up that I think is fantastic. What is the ratio of acrylic to the mediums that you recommend? Is there like a point where it's not a good ratio, or I guess, is there a point?
No, it depends. So it depends on which mediums we're talking about. With the gels, you can put as much paint as you want. If you go to like a 50-50, there's really no point in using more paint because you'll be matching pretty much the mass tone that you already have with that, like a heavy body paint. If you're using a heavy, using our heavy gel or a regular gel. In terms of ratio, I have a board that I can kind of show you. Just to give you a sense of how that mixing occurs. So this is heavy body Quin Magenta. And then here is this, I used the heavy gel matte. And one little drop, and then 2 drops, 3 drops, and then 6. And so depending on how much paint, again, because I'm using a color that's somewhat transparent, you can see 1 little drop to this volume of gel. Again, this is the heavy gel matte, so they're all going to be on the matte side in terms of their sheen. But you can see as a glaze, it's almost like a fluorescent pink with that in there as the light kind of moves across there, because we're talking little pigment to a lot of gel. But as we increase the amount of pigment going down, you can see when I get to a thick level here with the matte, that is almost starting to get to the heavy body in terms of the color. The sheen is different because the Quin Magenta is a little more glossy compared to the matte finish. So back to your kind of question about how much you can or can't add, you can certainly add as much as you want. And that's up to you. But you would just get a range from almost a glaze type, you know, all the way down to a saturated color that almost matches your paint color that you're using. With, you know, if I went to 12 drops, it would be nearly the same there. Okay, so that's the gels. And then some practical applications with those gels. One of the things that I thought I'd show you is just jumping off points for inspiration. So again, in this case, I'm going to use the heavy gel matte. And we're going to talk about doing a silicone mold. So almost casting the gel into a mold, more like a bas relief. So let me move these out of the way. And I have the heavy gel matte. This is milky white, as I said, when wet. And what I simply did was scoop this out and I spread it across my mold. And I allowed that to dry. This has been in here about 2 days. And so now, because this is silicone, it's kind of a natural resist to the acrylic. I can simply pull that acrylic out of that silicone mold.
Oh, wow. That
right?
is
And
so
now
cool.
I have this bas relief made out of a gel, a medium. And I can use that as a collage element. The thing about the silicone is it is a natural kind of resist to the acrylic. And you can buy this silicone, a variety of companies make a 2-part silicone that you mix together. This one I cast on top of a clay mold that I made, but you could just as easily do something natural. So this is another type of silicone. Stacy did this one, and this is a little walnut, and she made a cast of that. And then she mixed a little paint and a medium and put that in there, allowed that to dry. And now we have an acrylic skin that is from the walnut. So whether you make the mold yourself or you buy one, just know that the acrylic will release from that silicone. So now I have this, what am I going to do with it? So the next step is to take that skin and attach it to something. So I'm just going to use some of the same material that I made it from, and I'm just going to spread that on the back and butter this a little bit.
Now I want toast.
Right, butter the toast. And you'll want to take your time and do a nice even coat over the whole surface and get all of that covered. And then I can just attach that to my canvas or my substrate. Work out from the middle just to make sure you get your air bubbles out and any excess product, and allow that to dry. And once that dries, you'll wind up with a skin that's attached to your substrate. You can see this kind of beige or yellow. That's the matting solids that we talked about. It would look different if I did a gloss that was transparent. This one still has a little bit of time to go to dry. You can see there's a little bit of milky white in there. And I simply put some glass bead gel around the outside of this one.
Oh, that is so cool. And I mean, you could even, instead of using just the gel, you could mix in a little tint of, say, a green or something to where it's already having that like leafy kind of tinge of color.
Right. Yeah. So the good thing about the gels, if we go back to this board, with the gels, you can add in any color and you can control the color gel that you're going to spread into the silicone mold. After I put the glass bead gel on for some texture, then I just simply went back with our paints and I just started layering in some black gesso, then some micaceous iron oxide and some interference green on there. And then using a variety of our fluid colors, some of the India yellow, transparent iron oxide, a little raw umber, and just thinning those down and doing a wash and just creating kind of thin washes of a metallic rust sort of color. So you're able to create, you know, a relative bas relief with that. The other thing to keep in mind is that you can use the silicone on almost anything. So you just have to read the manufacturer's directions on the silicone for the drying time, because they vary from one to the other. They come in both putty and a liquid. So that's creating a bas relief using our gel.
Now I have several questions
All right.
before we move on. I had someone asking, could you paint that relief with the gel? Could you paint that with oil paints instead of using acrylics? So like do the entire almost like sculptural side of it and then start tinting it instead of like with the gesso and things, add in oil paints on top of that.
Painting oil paint on top of this. Yes,
Yeah.
you can paint oils on top of acrylics. We have several articles that kind of go over putting oils on top of acrylics. There's some caveats depending on which product you're using. Like light molding paste, we don't recommend. So definitely that's a question for emailing us, help@goldenpaints, to go over which products you can put on under there. But yes, some acrylics you can put under there and paint on top with your oils.
Now, sorry, I'm trying to find, there's a lot of like oohs and ahs that I'm going through with all the comments. I love it. Oh, somebody was asking, would that possibly adhere to ceramic?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the question.
Would that relief, instead of putting it on like a flat surface, could you put it on something like ceramics?
Yeah, so if you want, if I'll switch to the camera here, because this skin that I peeled out, right? So this is a flexible piece of acrylic. And all I need to do to glue this to a surface is just apply more wet product. So if I wanted to, I could use some acrylic and I could glue that to another shape. So yes, in theory, you could glue that to other object other than something flat. You'd have to do some testing on the ceramic because it would depend on how porous the ceramic is, whether it's glazed or not glazed. You know, so again, those are probably questions for emailing help@goldenpaints. But yes, in theory, these can be sculptural and glued to three-dimensional surface.
Love it. Now, one last question before I'll let you move on, I swear. To trim that, if you wanted to, can you just use scissors or like an X-Acto blade or?
Yeah, so this gel, if I had a scissors, I could demonstrate that. It wasn't a question that I thought of, but I could easily, I could probably, oh, here we have scissors appeared magically. So which is great. So I can go in here and if we really wanted to cut all that excess away, I could follow that, you know, and just cut that gel. So it cuts pretty easily with the scissors. You could use an X-Acto knife. So yes, the gel can be cut. Again, some caveats because really this could be done with heavy body paint. You could use almost any gel and you could use some of the paste. A few of them, you know, there's some caveats. For example, crackle paste wouldn't work well in this, but all, you know, you just do a couple of little experiments. Almost any paste or gel will work, even the heavy body paint.
That is so cool. Thank you for showing us. I know everybody in the comments are just like, just enthralled with the fact that you can make something like a relief with that.
Right, and that was the, yes, bas relief, because we're trying to work a little off the canvas surface and get more three-dimensional. So this is one approach. And I'll be talking a little bit next. We're going to look at the gels with aggregates. So I'll be talking a little bit about the glass bead gel, and we can come back to that. Let me go ahead and move these off, and then we can start with the next board. So the next one, so we just looked at 4 different gels. You could think of this next set as gels with something in them, and that's an aggregate. And so the first one that we have here is our glass bead gel. And then we have our clear granular gel. That's the one here in the middle. And then we have our coarse pumice gel, and that's this one. So the ingredient that's kind of in there, in this case, it's pretty self-evident. This is glass bead gel. And so we put real glass beads in there. You can think of that reflective paint that's used on highways. You can see there is a little kind of, the thicker it gets, there is a little kind of blue-green cast to it. But when it's fairly thin, like on the top there, it's pretty transparent. And we'll compare that one. So we're looking right now at the glass bead gel. The next one is the clear granular gel. And that one's bigger and chunkier. And those are like acrylic beads in there. And they're irregular shapes. So that's what lends this to that chunkiness that you see, and a little bit more of that hard edge where this is a little softer.
That is so fun. Love textures.
And then the last one is the coarse pumice gel. You can see this one is much more opaque compared to the other two. But again, you can really build up quite a bit of texture. It's a lot like working with a wet sand. So we'll scoop those out wet and kind of just do a quick comparison to the dry. And I'll use a palette knife here. So this is the glass bead gel. And you can hear, I'll do it again, but you can hear those glass bead gels, the glass beads in there.
Yep.
Again, spreading this out, you can see I'll flip this other board around. Whoop, there we go. So here it is, you know, real thin, dry, and of course, milky white. The glass bead gels are in there. As we let this dry, this will clarify. The next one we'll look at is the clear granular gel. This one has the bigger acrylic chunks in there. Again, you can hear them. If I scrape real hard, you can actually see how the beads in there leave a line as I drag that across the surface.
Oh, wow.
Again, very chunky. And then the last one is the coarse pumice gel. I dropped a board with wet product on.
It's okay. It's live. It happens.
This is the coarse pumice gel. And you can, again, all of these, because they're kind of gritty, you can hear that texture. So there they are, kind of wet. And then here they are on the top, dry. And just like before, we talked about mixing color with these. So you have the option of painting on top or mixing the color with them. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one down.
So glad you answered that. I knew somebody was going to ask that immediately.
So this, of course, is the glass bead gel, and it is dry. And I've gone ahead and painted on the top. If we do a little bit of close-up, I'm hoping you can see that texture under there. There we go. So we have, you know, the paint on top. And again, in this case, I'm using Ben's Yellow Medium, which is a fluid, and it's fairly single coat, fairly transparent. So you can see that texture of the glass bead gel really pushing through. Now, if I did subsequent, you know, 2, 3, 4 coats, I would slowly diminish that. So it depends how much you like that, and, you know, what your creative muse is getting you to think about. Again, I can mix them in there. So if we look at the bottom of this one, I've gone ahead and mixed that in with the glass bead gel. And again, you can see a little rounder, a little softer compared to the clear granular gel. That's the one with the acrylic beads, a lot bigger and chunkier. On the top here, I've painted on there. And again, we'll do a little close up so you can see that texture. of the irregular size beads showing through the paint. All right, and then there we go. So here is the granular gel. The bead size is much bigger compared to the glass bead gel. There we go. And then you can see down here on the bottom, I've mixed it in. So again, paint on top or mix the paint into the gel itself. And then the last one is the coarse pumice. And again, if we look here, this is just brushing on one coat of this benzimidazzolone yellow medium. And that is a fairly transparent color. So you still see some of that product coming through. One of the interesting things, and hopefully this shows, is when it's mixed with the product, you get this really kind of muted color.
Yeah, you can see, especially with the comparison of the three together, you can really see the difference in that color.
Right. So, and that's just, so again, depending on what, your point of inspiration is, what you're trying to accomplish, kind of dictates what, gel you might use, depending on how much texture you want or how transparent or how opaque you want it. So lots of different choices there. And just like before, we just did a little color. This is with the glass bead gel. And again, I'm using the benzimidazzolone yellow medium. That's down this side, and the glass bead gel. Here we have 1 drop at the top mixed with this a volume of glass bead gel. And then 2, 3, and 6 drops. And again, if I kept increasing the amount of paint there, I would bring that fairly close to what I have here just as raw paint in terms of the color. Each of these products is going to handle that pigment load a little differently. So it might be a different amount of paint that you have to add to achieve that. But works, as a glaze or transparent layering as well. So one of the things we talk about frequently is doing image transfers with gels, but I thought it might be nice to look at doing an image transfer with a gel that has an aggregate in it. So that's what I've started here. This was an image, and I can quickly show you how I did that. So we started out with our image, and I just simply took the glass bead gel. I'm going to scoop that out. And I'm going to put some product up here at the top. And so this will work with your laser images. It will also work with inkjet, although it's much more ethereal and you can lose some of the line. So I'm just going to try and create a fairly smooth, consistent layer over my image.
And it doesn't look like you're applying it super crazy thick either.
No.
Layer.
But if I wanted to, I could make this super thick. It would just take a lot longer to dry, but I'd have a lot more texture. So let me, just for the sake of argument here, we'll just put a lot more on there. So I could spread this all out and make a much thicker skin. It just depends on, what I might use it for afterwards, whether I might work it into a painting or a collage, but I can put that on there pretty thick. It doesn't look much now, but we need to let that glass bead gel dry. And of course, as it dries, it's going to clarify, and that ink is getting transferred to the gel. And so this is what it would look like then dry. So it's dried on my paper. And now that it's dry, I can start removing and ripping away that paper. Again, when we were talking about doing something three-dimensional, this gel is very flexible, even though it has glass bead gel in. So I could do something more sculptural or dimensional with it. Once I have that gel on there and dry, I have to then work at removing this paper. So the way that I would do that is I would just dampen the image, and you can use one of these little kitchen sponges, that has the textured side. And I would just go ahead and start rubbing. You can see I put on a fair amount of water to get that paper wet. And you can see as I start to rub, that image is going to come through. And I would just keep working to remove that paper. And you probably have to do this maybe 2 or 3 times and allow it to dry in between so you can see where you missed a spot. But eventually you'll get down to just the gel by itself. So this is the side that was on the image, and this is the textured side with the glass bead that's on there. So I can work at attaching that then to my substrate. And so in this case, I'm just working with a gesso board, ampersand gesso board, and I've mixed a little bit of that same benzimidazolone yellow. And now I have my gel skin that I can glue on there. I just wanted to show you this one because you can do them black and white, and you can also use color.
Oh, cool.
So to glue this one down, I could go back to my gels, and I could use my regular gel. I could use my soft gel. And again, I would just take a little bit of that product and I would spread it all on the back. Again, take the time to make sure it's nice and even, and I cover the whole area. And once I get all of that product smoothed out and covered, I can then glue that, anywhere that I want on my substrate. Depending on how big you're working, a sturdy wood substrate is better, but you can do these smaller scale on canvas. The other thing that I'll point out is, in addition to just gluing these down, allowing that to dry, if I wanted, may not show on this one, so I'll use the Quin Magenta. Again, this is the textured side, so it's the side that the glass bead is up on. This side that went to the image is a little smoother, but I could use a little bit of color. I just put a few drops on there, and I can paint the background before I glue this down so that that color then is showing through to this side with the texture on there. In addition to that, because you have this wonderful texture on there, I can go back and paint on top of that and have that glass bead texture show. So there's lots of different possibilities doing these. The image transfer can really be done with the gels and the gels with the aggregates. Again, some are going to work better than others, but for the most part, you'll want to work with those that are transparent. The coarse pumice gel, that's the one that's kind of that beigey brown color. That one, I could certainly do an image transfer with that, but the question might be like, why and what am I trying to achieve? But with the image transfer, any acrylic will work. It's just this one's going to be a lot more opaque, so you're going to see less of the image. So that's using the glass bead gel.
Now, I do have a question for you.
Yes.
The back side that you had with the ink kind of transferred, that side, yeah.
Yep.
Could you glue it, or like, I guess, kind of gel it that direction to where that would
right? So yeah, this is the heavily textured side, and so this side's a little more muted because you're looking through those glass bead gels, the glass beads, where this side's a little crisper because it was flattened onto the surface of the image. But if I wanted to glue this side down, yes, I could certainly apply paste and glue it this direction instead. Entirely, again, that determines like, what you're after creatively, which way you wanted to glue that down.
And just to make sure, because I know a couple of people have popped this question into the chats, and I just wanted to, just one more time, you can do this process with any gel.
Well, you can, I would stick with the transparent gels. The coarse pumice gel is going to be difficult, the extra coarse. So for the most part, yes, but there's a few caveats. You can even do it with the paste. Fiber paste works. Light molding paste works. Here I did one that's just plain soft gel gloss. So we were looking at soft gel gloss when we started. So the same idea. I just spread it out on the paper, allowed it to dry. You can see that where the gloss is. It's kind of shiny and stops right here on the edge. And then I just removed the paper. And again, now I have a skin and I can glue that really to whatever surface I want, whether it's, you know, three-dimensional or not. And which way I glue it is really up to me, because I could put the product on this side or the other side to glue it down to my surface. All right, so that's glass bead gel and image transfer. Any questions on that one?
I think we got to most of them.
All right. So the next group of products that we want to look at are our pastes. And on this board, we have 4 of those. And I have the first up will be our light molding paste. And that's this one. So light molding paste right here. The next one is our molding paste, and that's right here. And then we have the coarse molding paste, that's this one. And then we have our fiber paste, and that is this one. So you'll notice right away, one of the things that makes the paste a little different than our gels is they are opaque. Now, depending on how thinly I apply them, I can get them to be somewhat translucent. So you'll see that right here. I've applied it very thin. I can see through to that back. And even the same with the coarse. So some of these a little easier to see through than others, depending on how thick or thin you apply them. The light molding paste, you can see, I can see a little bit of that black, but it's certainly, I wouldn't say on the transparent side or even translucent. It's much more opaque than our gels. Again, I'm going to spread them out wet, and then we'll compare them to the dry. So the light molding paste, if you can feel this one, it is the lightest in terms of its weight and volume. And so you'll see quite opaque. But again, whatever I do with that texture, if I pile it on real thick, I can get it to retain most of that mark making. That's the light molding paste. The next one we're going to do is the regular molding paste, or I shouldn't say regular, molding paste. That's this one. And that's the second one. Again, if I pull this real loose across that surface, or I should say with a little more pressure, I can get it to be more to the translucent side, but again, the pastes are all opaque compared to the gels. And the coarse one, that one has a little bit of grit to it. So you might be able to hear that. And then the last one is our fiber paste. And so they look kind of similar when they're wet, but as they dry, their unique character kind of shows up. So with the light molding paste, this one's super absorbent. So the light molding paste, super absorbent. Think of it kind of like in terms of consistency, a little bit like marshmallow or marzipan. I'm not really a cook, so that may not be the best comparison. But, and then our molding paste, this one has the marble dust in it, so it's very smooth compared to the light molding paste. And then the coarse, this one has a lot of texture. It's great for doing, you know, like if you wanted to do colored pencil or chalk pastel on that. That texture is just beautiful for that, has a nice tooth to it. And then the last one is the fiber paste, a synthetic fiber that it's in there. Again, which one you might pick might be, you know, your choice of what you're after for texture or how absorbent you want it to be. In terms of mixing, you can mix these just like we did all the other ones. So here we have, in this case, I'm using our ultramarine blue fluid, and I've painted just one coat on top of there. So if you look again, the ultramarine on here, you'll notice we put those little black bars on there for transparency. So ultramarine, it's not as transparent as say the Quin Magenta that we were using, but it's not as opaque as, let's say, chromium oxide green or something. So with just one coat, you still get that texture coming through, but you also get a little bit of that product showing through with those. So again, paint on top, or I can mix the paint with. And again, I tried to keep these volume of paint each to the same size. So you can see the variation that you can get in terms of mixing the same amount of blue paint with each of the products. A little bit unlike the gels, you get some variation there.
That is so cool to see.
And then this one, same idea as before. We have the paint by itself on this side and the light molding paste here. And then we did the 1, 2, 3, and 6 drops. And you can see with the light molding paste, you would have to build up quite a few drops of paint to get it as dark as the color. But that's one of the lovely things about the paste. You get this whole variation in color that you can create.
It always looks like icing to me. Like I just want cake after.
After cake, yeah.
After I see these shows, I'm like, oh, icing on a cake.
And it does kind of have a little bit of that consistency when you're working with it and moving it around on your canvas. But yeah, probably not a good comparison in terms of food.
Yeah. Don't eat them. Whatever you do, don't eat them.
Right. Don't eat
our art supplies. There's icing.
Yep. So I'm just going to put a little bit of this out and then mix some paint with it just so you can see. You know, I like to use the fluids because they incorporate rather quickly. But you could certainly use our high flow, you could use the slow flat, you could use the heavy body. Really, any paint will mix with these gels and paste. It's just that they'll change the viscosity or the sheen that you're working with. So this is the ultramarine blue mixed with the light molding paste. And so one of the things that's nice about this one is you can create a lot of texture without creating a lot of weight. So if you wanted to kind of take that and move that forward a little bit, you can see here, I've applied it just using a palette knife and a damp brush. And so I was able to create a lot of texture on that one. And then this one is with the coarse molding paste. So this one is the one that's a little grittier. So you can see a little bit of the difference there. I'll kind of put these maybe just like that. So the light molding paste, a little bit softer, not as quite as gritty as the coarse. And so here they are, you know, this is the light molding paste. That's the one that's on the top. And then the coarse, this is the one that's kind of gritty. And so up close, there is a little difference between those. But certainly, again, depending on the texture or style that you're after, personal choice on which one you're going to want to use.
Now, I did have somebody ask a question, probably because I was talking about cake. Have you ever taken this the paste mediums and put it into a piping bag?
I have personally not taken the paste and put them into a piping bag, but I have seen other artists that have done that. Yes, very successful, in fact, applications. I'm not sure their little trade secrets how they do it, but yes, it's been done.
I say I've actually done it myself.
Good.
I usually put it into a little bit of like plastic wrap and then put that into my piping bag to where I don't have as much space around it. Like I don't have to load it up with as much paint. So I feel like I'm not wasting as much, but you can do
that's a good idea.
Colors. Yeah. You can do multiple colors and roll it together and then put it in, and just make sure you snip off the excess of the plastic wrap before you stick it into your piping bag. and then you can pipe it just like you would icing, and then it'll retain that shape.
Very
It's so
nice.
much
Well,
fun.
maybe we'll have to do that in a demo for you.
Yes. Another person was asking though, can you put alcohol inks on top of these?
Can I do what?
Alcohol inks. Can you use them
Oh,
on top?
yes. So yes, you can use alcohol inks on top of the acrylic as a substrate underneath there. Again, we don't make alcohol ink, so I would make sure you read the instructions on the back of the manufacturer who does. There might be some caveats about which products they could go on.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
I think I have, yes, I do have another question.
Okay.
With the image transfer process
Yes.
specifically, and I guess in general, how archival are all of these? And I guess I would say that in a general sense, as well as the image transfer process was it specifically asked.
I have some image transfers that I've done that are about 20 years old. And they're holding up fine. I would definitely do help at Golden Paints email and find out on their archival quality. I think part of that would be dependent on the type of copier that you're using, and the ink that's used in that copier would have a lot to do with its archival quality. I'm sure from each manufacturer of those printers and printer inks would vary. So I would email help at Golden Paints and find out. We probably have somebody who's done some research on that.
All right, and I did have one last question I know that popped up here. As far as using, I would assume they're talking about like the pastes that have a little bit more of that like gritty texture to it. How does that compare to like a pastel ground?
Pastel ground, we don't have that one on here, but and we don't have fine pumice, which is the other one that's close to it. But I would say that it's not as coarse as the coarse molding paste. I think this one is a little rougher, a little more toothier than the pastel ground, but would certainly hold the pastel because I've done that on top of the coarse molding paste.
Yeah, I feel like that would give it a little bit more, just a little bit more of a tooth,
Right. And again, the other thing to remember with these, and it's true of the pastel ground, is I can tint these. So this is my fiber paste and this is the coarse. So I could tint this and add some color. Maybe I don't want it as strong as that if I'm going to do colored pencil on top or pastel, but certainly you can tint those.
Ooh, I didn't even think about the colored pencil on top.
Right.
Gotta be
Lots of
careful.
options. So we're nearing the end. I wanted to quick recap because we covered 11 different products between our gels and our pastes. And plus we worked with a couple of different colors. So all of those colors that we worked with, I pulled from this, our fluid set. So if you've not worked with the fluids and want to give those a try, this might be a good option. I use the benzimidazoline yellow medium, the Quin magenta, and the ultra blue there. And then to get a sampling of the paste and the gels, we have the acrylic 6 texture, and that has several of the gels and paste that we went over. And then if you really want to be adventuresome, you can do the Explorer 14. And so this will give you several types of our paints as well as some mediums. So that's the Explorer 14 and the gel and paste set of 6.
I love those so much. They're just, it's enough to kind of get you familiar with the pastes, and it's a good amount in there too, but like it's such a great like gift idea.
So,
I want to give my friends all of these.
Pop one of these open.
Plus, I also really love the packaging. I use those boxes after I'm done with them for other things.
Yeah, and so if you're not really sure which one might be applicable for you, and you just want to kind of experiment, this is a good way to do it, because you get this 2-ounce fluid size, which is quite a much that you can do several experiments with. This one will have your color in there, so you can, do the color as well. So good idea. Explorer 6 or, Explorer 14 or the Acrylic 6.
Now, I did have a couple more questions come in real quick before we officially sign off. Is there any kind of a chart or something that someone can refer to if they want to check these out? Like if there's like something that has like a visual representation that they could find online?
Well, we have our website, so they can go to the website, and then of course we have justpaint.org, so you can always go to Just Paint, read lots of different articles about all of the gels and pastes, or look at our website.
And then the last question here I'll ask for you is someone was saying that they've not used a palette knife before, which I would highly suggest they give it a whirl. But would all of these work well with a brush?
Yes, you can use a brush. Some are going to be, a little more difficult with a brush, depending on how soft your brush might be, but you just have to experiment a little bit. But you can push all of these around and make texture with the brush as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now let me pop myself back on here, change the viewpoint. Here we are. Hey.
There you are.
All right. So again, if you guys are interested in anything that Kevin was showing us, make sure you go to the website, JerrysArtarama.com, and type in today's class code, and that'll pull up the teacher's cart with everything in there. And that was, sorry, I wrote it down over here, JL252. It's hard to keep track of them.
Right. And always email us at help@goldenpaints if you still have questions.
Definitely. And of course, if you did put your question in the comments and we did miss it, or if you are watching this in the future, you also still can make sure you pop it just in the chat below, and I will always keep an eye on that and send anything over to Kevin if I need to. But that was the show, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And of course, Kevin, thank you for being here and showing us all of these amazing mediums. I need all of them.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting us. And again, if you have any questions, email or call us. Thank you, Emmy.
Definitely. All right, everybody, that was the show, and I will see you next week. Have a great night. Bye.